I honestly did not expect these wide receivers to be on this list. Y'all know back in 2022, maybe we were a little harsh on a few wide receivers saying that they were the worst picks in fantasy drafts. And now in 2023, we are going to be coming back around on those guys because in a couple of these situations, they actually improved last season and their fantasy cost is significantly cheaper than it was last year. So all I ask in this video is for you to not hold me to my 2022 takes when we reevaluate these guys in 2023 and when they may actually be great values at a much cheaper cost than last season. But the first guy we're going to talk about here with Stefan Diggs isn't that, right? Obviously, with Stefan, this is a wide receiver that you were excited to draft last year, you were excited to draft the year before, and all the way down the line. Now, if you're looking at where he's being drafted right now in fantasy football drafts, Stefan Diggs is going at the beginning of the second round in your ESPN redraft leagues, and in Underdog best ball drafts, Stefan Diggs is going in the middle of round one. Now, with Diggs, this is the perfect example of a selection that you would make and have all the security in the world. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Stefan Diggs can be the number one overall wide receiver in fantasy. Maybe he can for a couple weeks, but through the course of the entire season, I would be surprised if Stefan Diggs finished ahead of Justin Jefferson, Chase, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill. I mean, if he was number one on that list of 5 guys, it would be a little bit surprising. But why I think Stefan Diggs is so compelling at his price point right now is he has no red flags at all attached to his profile. Like if we're going to go through and look at his ADP of 12.6 in these ESPN redraft contests and look at other players going around him, we can come up with red flags for everybody but Stefan Diggs. Like the guy right before him, Derrick Henry. Now with Derrick Henry, not going to say you shouldn't draft him, but it's fair to say that he has 2 glaring issues. One, he may be playing in a piss poor offense this next season. Now, of course, DeAndre Hopkins going over to Tennessee makes that a little bit less of a concern than it was a month ago, but still the Tennessee Titans are minus 120 for under 7.5 wins this next year. So Las Vegas sportsbooks are telling us that the Titans are most likely bad. Plus with Derrick Henry, this is a running back that is now 2 years past where you traditionally expect running backs to fall off. Now, of course, he's an outlier. Like I said, not saying that you shouldn't draft him, but he has the age as well as offensive concerns that you don't see with Stefan Diggs. Going over to the guy right behind Stefan Diggs, you have Davante Adams tied with 12.6 for his average ADP. And if we're looking at Adams, he's a little bit older than Diggs. In reality, I don't care too much about that, right? I mean, Davante Adams still was so damn good last season. I don't think from a talent perspective, you have to be concerned about what you have there. But with Adams, you do have to be concerned about the overall offense. I mean, you're looking at a quarterback situation that is a massive question mark. You are looking at a running back room that's a question. Like, we don't know what's going on with Las Vegas, and that does inherently bring a little bit of risk to Davante Adams. Our next guy here, Jonathan Taylor, is a running back that may be in a pretty bad offense this next year coming off an injury. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't draft JT. Hell, I'm drafting a lot of Jonathan Taylor. I'm even drafting him ahead of Derrick Henry, but Jonathan Taylor himself has that red flag. Saquon Barkley, after that, someone that I will say I'm drafting, still clearly has the red flag that he may miss some time this next season. Now, I think that he's most likely going to play, but it's not a guarantee like Stefan Diggs, right? Then you see a teardrop where you're going down to like Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback for the next guy. So just in general, in this tier of guys in late round 1, the beginning of round 2, Stefan Diggs is really the only player that I'm looking at that has absolutely no red flags while still has an elite level ceiling. Diggs for 3 straight seasons now has been a top 10 wide receiver from a points per game perspective. Stefan Diggs for 3 straight seasons now has been a wide receiver that has averaged 27% of his team's targets on a per game basis. He's averaged 2.6 yards per route run. He has averaged over 100 air yards per game every single year since he's been in Buffalo. We'll have another Buffalo build to talk about later on in this video, but nonetheless, there's not a lot of target competition. They really only add in Dalton Kincaid. So if we can start off our draft, say, at pick like 12, Stefan Diggs, and get the super secure, stable cornerstone asset and follow it up at the beginning of round 2, maybe with the swing for some upside with a guy like Jonathan Taylor, with a guy like Davante Adams, Saquon Barkley, whoever that may be, I think Stefan Diggs is like the perfect guy to start your team off with. But now going over to our next wide receiver, this is someone that I did not draft at all last year. Y'all know I drafted 700 teams on Underdog last season, and one of the reasons we had so much success is because I avoided Michael Pittman Jr. like the plague. With Michael Pittman Jr., this was a wide receiver that people were comparing to freaking Julio Jones just because Matt Ryan, who was pushing 40, was coming over. We were looking at Matt Ryan saying, okay, well, let's look at how the Atlanta Falcons just treated him. Let's look at his play last year. By no means is it a guarantee that Matt Ryan's a massive upgrade on what you have in Indianapolis. It makes zero sense to assume that Michael Pittman's all of a sudden going to get so much better and should be a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. Now, it's a completely different price point this go around. With Michael Pittman, this is a wide receiver that is not going in round 3 anymore. Instead, this is a wide receiver that in Underdog drafts, you are getting at the very end of round 6. Now, I know that sounds like it's still a little bit early. Keep in mind, in Underdog drafts, wide receivers get pushed up. So if you're just going to be looking at what you have in terms of his wide receiver ranking, Michael Pittman is the wide receiver 34. So he's a low-end wide receiver 3, a high-end wide receiver 4. Now, if you're going to go over and look at what you have in ESPN drafts, there Michael Pittman is the wide receiver 33. So you're seeing the same thing, and Michael Pittman has an ADP of 91. But what's so funny about this is if you look at the underlying numbers for Michael Pittman this past year in Indianapolis, he actually improved upon where he was in 2021. This has been 3 straight seasons now where Michael Pittman has pretty much improved across the board. He went from wide receiver 84 as a rookie, wide receiver 28 as a second-year player, wide receiver 23 this past season. You're seeing his targets go up from about 4.5 per game now to this past year almost at 9 targets per contest. Now, of course, the advanced efficiency metrics did drop off where Michael Pittman only had 1.5 yards per route run, which was really bad this past year. But to be fair to Michael Pittman, he played 12 games with Matt Ryan, who had an adjusted yards per pass attempt of 6.0, pretty much dead last in the NFL. He played 3 games with rookie season Sam Ehlinger. Now, of course, I'm a former Texas Longhorn. Sam Ehlinger used to be our Texas quarterback. Hook 'em horns, but still, he's not good, especially not as a rookie. Then you played 3 games with 33-year-old Nick Foles. So I understand the concern that you may have with Michael Pittman with Anthony Richardson. And by no means can I come out here and tell you that Anthony Richardson is going to be a good NFL quarterback. I have no idea. But what I do know is there's a chance that Anthony Richardson is much better than the quarterback play that you saw a year ago in Indianapolis, where the average adjusted yards per pass attempt was 5.5. That was dead last in the NFL. The quarterback play could pretty much only get better. He was a top 24 wide receiver last season. He's now being drafted as a low-end wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4. So it's crazy to say, but I'm in on Michael Pittman this year. Now, our next guy, super easy call. Chris Olave just looks like a bona fide stud. Now, to be completely honest with you, Underdog drafters already know this. Like, you're not going to get a discount on Chris Olave in Underdog drafts, where he is currently going as the wide receiver 12. He has an ADP of 19, so you have to take him in the middle of the second round. However, if you're going to be looking at ESPN drafts, there Chris Olave has an ADP of 43. So you're getting Chris Olave in the middle of the 4th round instead of the middle of the 2nd round, and he is the wide receiver 16 off draft boards. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to go and look at the year 2000 and beyond and look at wide receivers to have a similar rookie season to Chris Olave when it comes to their receiving yards per game, as well as their target share in their offense. Their target share is going to be the targets per game that they see divided by the team's passing attempts per game. And that is going to give us an indication of how much of a target hog that player truly is. Now, you have throughout NFL history, pretty much dating back to the year 2000, only elite level wide receivers similar to Chris Olave as rookies. The most recent examples include Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Before that, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans. Before that, Keenan Allen, Julio Jones, AJ Green. The man is a stud, okay? Like I said, in Underdog drafts, he's priced appropriately. I can't come out here and tell you, yeah, you got to take him in every single draft. But I would draft Chris Olave easily ahead of Deebo Samuel, ahead of Devonta Smith, ahead of T. Higgins, ahead of DK Metcalf. I would draft Chris Olave in round 2, round 3 in your ESPN leagues. If you're able to get him in round 4, there's no excuse why you can't come away with him in your draft this year. But of course, real quick, if you want to get into a draft with us, you know we are live streaming literally every single day on this YouTube channel. We are getting in underdog drafts, and on Underdog, those are going to be best ball contests and no time commitment at all during the year. That's how I drafted 700 teams and how I won $150,000 last season on Underdog. It's the same place where you can see all those player props from this video. And if you sign up with the link in the comment section or the description, you're going to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Plus, you're going to get my 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com, and it's available in damn near every state. You can see the map here. But now let's go over to our next guy, who last year, similar to Michael Pittman, was being drafted round 3 of Underdog drafts. We called it the worst pick ever, and I was a little bit nervous he was going to crush us. But Gabe Davis didn't really do much last season, right? Like, Gabe Davis for a 3rd round pick in those Underdog drafts was disappointing and kind of laughable that people were taking him back then at that price. But if you look at the underlying numbers with Gabe Davis, and you remove the fact that he was going that early in drafts last year, last season should have been a success for him, right? I mean, he goes from the wide receiver 70 to the wide receiver 39. It's phenomenal improvement. With Gabe Davis, he goes from 34 receiving yards per game up to 56. He goes from about 4 targets per game up to 6.2. He goes from 51 air yards per game up to 95. So Gabe Davis took that step forward, and he fully implemented himself as an every down player for the Buffalo Bills offense. Exactly what people wanted to see, exactly why they were drafting him in round 3. Now, round 3 turns out was a very bad price tag, and nobody should have been taking him there, duh. But if we're projecting this out now at his new current cost, Gabriel Davis looks like a pretty strong investment, right? Because he's still incredibly young. He's just going into his age 24 season. If we go and look at where he's being drafted right now, Gabe Davis in your ESPN drafts, there is going to be going as the wide receiver 47. He's going behind DJ Chark, Kadarius Toney, Juju Smith-Schuster, Treylon Burks, Jacoby Myers. There, I mean, hell, he's going as an 11th round selection. If you're going to go over to Underdog, obviously with it being best ball, you're naturally going to see Gabe Davis pushed up a bit. Gabe Davis there, instead of being the wide receiver 47, is the wide receiver 39. He's going at pick 75, but almost regardless of the format, I find myself drafting Gabe Davis this year, which is just so funny in comparison to what we had a year ago. But now going over to our next guy, I had to talk Jackson Smith-Njigba. Okay, first off, I got to interview the man at the NFL draft on the red carpet, which was incredible. So I will be a little bit biased, I will admit. But beyond that, what I want to be looking at with Jackson Smith-Njigba is how good of a prospect this man was. Now, just in case you did not get to watch us all offseason on our Dynasty Fantasy Football channel, we can go through and we can just outline what makes JSN so special. So this was a top high school recruit going to Ohio State. He goes to an Ohio State roster in 2020 that already has in the receiving room Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, as well as Jamison Williams. But JSN says, you know what? I don't care. Let me go there. Okay, we're going to go to the best wide receiver room in college football. And after his true freshman season, going into year 2, I mean, you had to assume Olave was the wide receiver 1. You had to assume Garrett Wilson was the wide receiver 1. But Jackson Smith-Njigba in 13 games came out and posted 1,600 receiving yards as a true sophomore when Garrett Wilson was a junior, when Chris Olave was a senior. And we just got done talking about how good these guys are. Obviously, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are both viewed as phenomenal wide receivers in the NFL. And JSN was the number 1 wide receiver on this Ohio State roster at a younger age. Now, JSN was injured this past season, so we really didn't get to see what he would have done alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. But regardless, if we look at our wide receiver prospect model, dating back to the year 2014, the only wide receivers to score similarly to Jackson Smith-Njigba were Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, Sammy Watkins, as well as Calvin Ridley. Now, I know some people may say that Sammy Watkins was do not say Sammy Watkins is a bust. You will hurt my feelings dearly. On this list, you pretty much only have massive hits, The price point is very obtainable because you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett both on this roster. Right now in ESPN drafts, you're getting Jackson Smith-Njigba off the board at pick 101. He is the wide receiver 38. And in my mind, it's just a straight shot for upside, right? Because I think there's a non-0% chance, and I know this is crazy, but I think there's a non-0% chance that Jackson Smith-Njigba is the wide receiver 1 on the Seattle Seahawks by the time we get to the fantasy football playoffs. Not to mention, if you were to see an injury to either Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf, that could just artificially fuel JSN in his target share this next season. And I think you could possibly see that Jamar Chase rookie year at the end of the season if you have an injury to one of those two guys. Now, our next rookie, very strong option as well. Now, he is much cheaper than JSN, and he should be much cheaper than JSN. Quinton Johnston was a great prospect in his own right. Johnston checked almost every single box that we looked for, in that he broke out as a true freshman. He dominated as a true sophomore. He declared as a true junior, and he goes round 1 of the NFL draft. If you do your historical research in figuring out what translates from these college wide receivers to fantasy football success at the next level, those are the 4 big boxes that you want checked. Johnston checks every single one. If you look at him in our wide receiver prospect model, he doesn't score as high as JSN just because he didn't have to go up against the same target competition that JSN had, but he's still next to some massive hits. He's next to guys like Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb, Deebo Samuel, if you want to throw him on there. But to be fair with Johnston, it's not like he is just complete bust proof. You do have some other guys like Jalen Reagor, Corey Coleman, Corey Davis on this list that didn't work out. But nonetheless, it's almost a similar situation to JSN, where you're betting on an extreme talent, where if his situation changes, all of a sudden you could see an elite ceiling with great quarterback play. But obviously, you're going to get him at the very end of your draft because he's parked behind Mike Williams and Keenan Allen for the time being. But I think that's all we have for this video. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking this out. And of course, if you play fantasy football, you better be dropping a like. You better be subscribed to the channel. And if you want to get into a draft with us today, tomorrow, the next day, you know every single day we're going to be live streaming Underdog Fantasy drafts. Best ball, no time commitment at all during the year. That's why it's the best place for you to pick up some extra fantasy football teams and not replace the one that you currently care most about. But if you sign up with the link in the comment section or to the description, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flogfantasy.com. But I think that's it. Really do appreciate you and really hope that I get to draft with you in the live stream later tonight.